Hi, I'm Joe Finsternis, and today I'll be talking to you about a movie called The Day. Now, this film takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where the country has been torn apart by war, and you're following this small group of survivors. It takes place years after everything sort of went to hell, and this group used to be much bigger with about 12 people, but now they've just been dwindled down to 5, and they're sort of wandering the countryside looking for food at this point. They end up finding a house that they can rest in, and hopefully it'll provide shelter, for a while. First thing I'd like to say about the movie is I like the way that it looked. They sort of took the footage and took away as much color from it as possible without making it full-on black and white. And whenever it went into flashback mode, it would go into full color. So I thought it looked really interesting, but as it started out, I thought it was really slow for the first 10 minutes, and it felt really boring. But after a while, I started sort of becoming invested in a lot of the dialogue that was going on. It had me interested in the characters. One complaint that I have, though, regarding acting is Dominic Monaghan is in the film, who you may remember as Merry from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And in this, he sort of has this over-the-top, gruff voice to make him sound like a badass, because, being a badass isn't actually about doing badass things or even being a complete badass at heart. You have to sound like this, and you know that people won't mess with you. And that just sort of threw me off, but after a while I got used to it. And as they're in this house, they go down into the basement, and they find a stash of canned food there, which was sort of another problem. Not necessarily a problem, is really a nitpick, I guess, but whenever they show canned food in this movie, it is missing the entire label. Apparently, the filmmakers couldn't afford to show these brand names in their movie, but whatever. After they find the food, though, it turns out that the house was set up to be some kind of trap, and then shit starts hitting the fan, and it starts getting pretty intense until we're introduced to the first bad guy, who is kind of just this cookie-cutter slimeball character. He sort of moves around almost snake-like in the way that he carries himself, and when he opens his mouth, he has this really soft-spoken voice like, "I don't even think you have any bullets left in your gun." And it's not interesting or even creepy. It's just a very typical bad guy role. And when the heroes are talking to him, they're responding in the way that a couple of teenagers would respond to each other if they're getting into a petty argument. As they're pointing their guns at him, they're just shouting at him like, "Fuck you! Fuck you!" Whenever the bad guy says something, it's like, "No! Fuck you!" And it just felt so silly to me. Plus, there was this interrogation scene that followed soon after that, where they had this woman tied to a chair. This guy was getting all up in her face, saying a lot of really mean things to her, and he even cuts a little bit of skin off of her leg. And it felt so much more underwhelming than it should have been. I really did not feel the intensity that the scene should have had. I don't know, as much dialogue as there was at the beginning of the film, it didn't feel like you really got to know these characters as people. They didn't feel like people. They felt like characters in a movie, and ultimately that's all they were. But if you can't get invested in the characters in a movie like this, it's pretty much going to end up falling apart on you. Even during the final act, when more bad guys started coming to the house and the heroes were in some real danger, this one woman just starts arguing with another woman, as the bad guys are approaching right outside. She just stops to cuss this other woman out like a bitch, and she ends up getting hurt, as can be expected in this situation. So that's pretty much what'll happen if you're in real danger and you stop to shout at someone. So I'm glad that things sort of played out realistically in that respect, but from then on it just gets really predictable. I figured, this one guy's not going to last very long. She's probably going to do that. He's probably going to react to the situation in this way. And it all started happening in the exact way that I sort of pictured it. And once again, I just couldn't get invested. The movie overall just felt like a chore to get through, and I really can't recommend it to anyone. If you're a big fan of these sort of post-apocalyptic future-based horror films, then look somewhere else. The Day, as far as horror movies go, I've seen a few of them that would make The Day look like a masterpiece. It's not the worst film I've ever seen by any means, but it's just really bland and uninspired. So, like I said, watch something else. Anyway, that's all I have to say about it. I hope you all have a good one.